You ever feel deep down a different kind of energy? An inexplicable love for someone you've never met, or even for an idea, a moment, a feeling? Have you ever had the impression there's something bigger, invisible, and powerful, guiding your steps when the world seems to be falling apart? If so, you're not alone. And what if I told you this deep feeling isn't just an isolated experience or a trick of the mind, but the first sign of a spiritual phenomenon changing all of humanity? Before we go on, stop for a second and ask yourself, what if this mysterious force was real? What if it wasn't just an ancient belief, but a collective awakening happening right now in our generation? I want you to stick with me until the end of this video. Here's why. This isn't just another piece of content about spirituality. It's a real scientific, profound, and transformative journey. If you feel touched by it, hit like, subscribe to the channel, and share your experiences in the comments, because this is a movement that's growing every day, and you're the one who can make a difference. But what exactly is going on? Why are so many people in different parts of the world experiencing radical internal changes, feelings of unconditional love, spontaneous acts of compassion, and even glimpses of transcendence? Have you ever wondered if all this is just a coincidence, a series of disconnected events, or if there's something bigger, hidden beneath the surface of our everyday reality? There's an answer, and it comes from the past, from a man whose name you might never have heard, Edgar Cayce, also known as Cayce. Cayce was an American mystic from the early 20th century who, in trance states, delivered thousands of prophecies, medical diagnoses, and spiritual messages that still intrigue scholars, scientists, and spiritual seekers today. And the most impressive thing is that he didn't talk about specific religions or isolated ancient myths. He spoke of a Christ consciousness, a collective spiritual awakening that doesn't refer to the literal return of a messianic figure, but to the manifestation of a divine, unconditional love flowing through ordinary people in times of crisis. Imagine for a moment that we're not living through a social collapse or just another existential crisis, but the fulfillment of an ancestral calling predicted over 100 years ago by one of modern history's greatest psychics. Wouldn't that explain the wave of altruistic behaviors, solidarity, and even personal miracles witnessed around the world? This isn't some fanciful vision. Edgar Cayce got predictions right that are now historical and undeniable. He predicted World War I and II, major economic crises, medical advancements, and even climate change, all decades before they happened. His deep connection to this universal consciousness allowed him to see the future and reveal truths that to many seemed impossible. But the prophecy that interests us today is the one that talks about the awakening of Christ consciousness, described by Cayce as a collective experience that emerges in deep trance, a profound inner transformation brought about not by religious leaders or gurus, but by each of us in our small daily actions. And what makes this prophecy so impressive is its progressive nature, divided into 3 waves, each more intense and far-reaching than the last. This trajectory isn't just spiritual, but also psychological and social, and it's happening before our eyes, even if we're often unaware. To understand this, we need to see these 3 waves of transformation as distinct but interconnected stages of a process leading humanity to a new level of existence. The first wave began in the 2000s. It was a subtle awakening, almost invisible to most, but crucial for paving the way. Many people started questioning old lifestyles, seeking answers within themselves, and cultivating a greater sense of self-awareness. Small, spontaneous acts of compassion began to emerge, inner healing movements gained more attention, and the seeds of unconditional love started to sprout. Then came the second wave, triggered in 2020, when the entire world faced a global crisis, not just health, but also social and existential. This wave can be understood as the cracked heart of humanity. Collective suffering created space for love to enter, no longer as a distant idea, but as a radical, transformative feeling. Millions of people experienced intense empathy for strangers, new forms of solidarity spread powerfully, and a new collective consciousness was born, based on interconnectedness and mutual care. Now we're living the third wave, a true shower of light that, since the mid-2020s, has been embodying this Christ consciousness in all areas of life. This wave is visible in the multiplication of peace leaders, in the transformation of social systems, in the integration of science and spirituality, and especially in the internal change each person feels, that spark that we are all parts of a greater whole, called to act with love in a world that desperately needs healing. These waves aren't just ancient prophecies, they are living experiences that can be felt by anyone willing to open their heart and mind to this new reality. Do you feel it? If you haven't noticed it yet, pay attention, because the next step of this journey might be closer than you think. We could talk for hours about spirituality, awakening, and collective consciousness, but nothing touches more deeply than real stories, ordinary people. Folks like you and me, human beings living their lives until something changes. Let's start with Michael Chen. He was a software engineer in Chicago, skeptical, rational. His daily life was code, spreadsheets, and performance reports. One day, while jogging in the park, he saw a man collapse on the ground, a homeless man. Nobody stopped, but Michael couldn't just keep going. He knelt beside that stranger and stayed there. He listened to him, he hugged him, and he cried with him. He said, "It was like I was feeling this man's pain as if it were my own. I had never felt anything like it. It was like something inside me had opened up." That was the first time Michael questioned everything, and he was never the same again. Maria Santos, a bank teller in Rio de Janeiro, she never cared much for spirituality. She worked hard, supported 2 kids, lived on autopilot. In 2021, after losing her father to the virus, she had an emotional breakdown. She stayed in bed for weeks, unable to get up, until one day, during an intense dream, she had a vision. A brilliant man told her, "You are not alone. There is a light inside you that the world needs to see." She woke up transformed. She started visiting elderly people in nursing homes in the outskirts, bringing food, affection, and a listening ear. For the first time, she felt peace. Maria says, it wasn't religion. It was love. It was a mission. And then there's Emma, a little girl just 7 years old in Vancouver. During the war that broke out in several countries in 2023, Emma heard all the news, adults' questions, distressed faces. One day at a charity fair, she broke her piggy bank and donated everything she had, not coins, but her favorite toys. She said, "If another child can have joy, it's worth it." Psychologists have reported a massive increase in early empathy in children over the past 5 years, as if an entire generation has been born with their hearts turned towards a greater purpose. These aren't just accounts. They are calls to the journey, as Joseph Campbell describes in his famous hero's journey structure. Every transformation begins this way: a call, a moment of rupture, the crossing of a threshold. These stories point to something greater, something that's sprouting like a collective seed in the human heart, in every corner of the planet. But now, what if I told you that science is, finally, catching up with these signs? And that there are observable explanations for all of this? For many years, talking about spiritual awakening was the exclusive territory of faith and personal experience. But we're entering a new era where science is starting to confirm what mystics already knew. Something is happening inside us, something profound. Neuroimaging research shows that during states of deep, compassionate meditation, a brain region called the anterior cingulate, associated with empathy, activates, and there's a notable reduction in activity in the amygdala, the center linked to fear and aggression. When volunteers experience strong sensations of compassion or spiritual connection, their brains literally behave as if they are deactivating classic self-preservation mechanisms. It's as if the separate self dissolves, giving way to a universal us. Dr. Andrew Newberg, one of the most respected neurotheologians in the world, performed brain scans on Buddhist monks, Carmelite nuns, and devotional meditators who claimed to feel the divine presence. The results are impressive. All showed the same neurological pattern. The thalamus, the sensory gateway, reduces external stimuli, while the parietal lobe, which defines where I end and the world begins, decreases its activity. The result? The person feels one with everything. And it doesn't stop there. In 2024, a team from Kyoto University published an article analyzing DNA samples from volunteers involved in humanitarian projects and people who reported transformative experiences of compassion. They found a higher prevalence of the OXTR gene, linked to the production of oxytocin, the love and empathy hormone. In other words, there's a biological predisposition to compassion, as if the body is being prepared for a collective behavioral leap. But nothing is more surprising than the study led by the HeartMath Institute in California. They discovered that the human heart emits an electromagnetic field 60 times more powerful than the brain, and that this field changes according to emotional states like gratitude, compassion, and love. This field, surprisingly, interacts with the surrounding environment. In other words, our emotional vibration not only transforms us, but transforms the world around us. You know what all this means? That there's scientific confirmation for what was once seen as spiritual daydreaming. That Christ consciousness isn't a fantasy, but the real manifestation of a new state of being. Love has form. Love has frequency. Love can be measured, felt, and expanded. But maybe you're telling me now, this is all beautiful, but what about those who aren't Christian? Is Christ consciousness only for those who follow Jesus as a spiritual figure? The answer is definitely not. What Cayce called Christ consciousness was not an endorsement of dogmatic or exclusive religion. On the contrary, he spoke of a universal force of love, present in all traditions, just with different names. In the Bhagavad Gita, a central work of Hinduism, Krishna tells Arjuna, "Whenever righteousness declines and unrighteousness prevails, I manifest myself." This manifestation isn't necessarily in physical form, but a descent of universal truth into the human heart. It's the same energy Cayce described, the awakening of the divine spark. In Mahayana Buddhism, we have the archetype of Avalokiteshvara, the bodhisattva of compassion who vowed never to rest until all beings were liberated from suffering. He is described as one who hears the cries of the world and acts. His vow is practically identical to Christ's mission, to love your neighbor as yourself. It's a frequency, a consciousness. In Islam, Allah has 99 names, and one of them is Ar-Rahman, the infinitely merciful. Divine mercy is the core of the Islamic faith, where even angels are described in their multiple functions as extensions of divine love. Just like Jesus' teachings, this mercy always seeks to heal, reconcile, and uplift. And in mystical Judaism, we find Chesed, one of the Sephirot of the Tree of Life, which represents gracious, expansive, creative love, emanating from Ein Sof, the infinite source. In the Zohar it reads, "The world is sustained by kindness," a clear reflection of the Christic energy described by Cayce. What does all this show us? That unconditional love is a transcultural, universal, timeless archetype. It's in all traditions that sought the transcendence of ego and connection with something greater. Christ consciousness, therefore, doesn't belong to a religion, but to the human soul. It is the language of the spirit. This understanding opens a new path. When we recognize the divinity in others, regardless of where they were born or what they believe, we begin to actively participate in global transformation. And what's more, we stop comparing paths and start seeing bridges of light. The true spirituality of our time, as Cayce said, doesn't divide us, it unites us. These three topics establish the emotional, narrative, and scientific foundations to deeply support the concept of Christ consciousness manifesting globally, and connect the individual viewer to the collective through compassion and science. The next step continues this natural flow of ascension, moving to systemic impact, personal calling, and the prophetic climax. Everything we've started to feel individually, that different spark, that loving force that moves us without explanation, is now becoming something systemic, global, visible. We are witnessing, and perhaps haven't named it yet, an invisible movement of light. It doesn't appear on the news, but it's in hospital corridors, classrooms, the decisions of more conscious leaders, in companies that have finally discovered that profit isn't everything, that lives are worth more. Look at what's happening in the most unlikely places. In marginalized neighborhoods of big cities, young people previously given up on have spontaneously started organizing to clean streets, teach computer skills to children, plant community gardens. There's no funding, no famous leader. There's only the force of a collective purpose that springs from what seems to be concrete love. In Philadelphia, a criminal judge refused to incarcerate a young man who committed a minor theft. Instead, he personally accompanied him weekly to get him into a mentorship program. The result, 80% reduction in recidivism, a shift from judgment to active compassion. And in companies like Cloudwork in Japan, CEOs are hiring monks to guide strategic decisions not based on profit, but on the emotional harmony of employees. Internal reports reveal less turnover, more innovation, and bursts of spontaneous gratitude among colleagues. But perhaps nothing better represents this invisible movement than school associations in Kenya. In several regions, children have been observed creating listening circles to support classmates who lost family members in wars or droughts. They weren't taught to do this. They felt it. Teachers reported never seeing anything like it. A collective emotional intelligence that arises without command, without external stimulus, as if they were being inspired by something greater than themselves. Could this something greater just be a coincidence? Or perhaps we are at the exact point of Edgar Cayce's prophecy, where unconditional love begins to flow not through spiritual institutions, but through the veins of human society. And there's an important detail here, and maybe you've unconsciously noticed it already. These spontaneous acts of compassion go viral faster than hate on social media. Yes, information science has already identified this. They call it the upward emotional amplification effect, meaning content that awakens faith, generosity, and beauty tends to have more organic sharing because it releases dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin, creating a cycle of collective well-being. Every time someone posts an act of kindness, it generates an invisible chain of replication. It's almost as if we're programmed to copy luminous behaviors. Cayce anticipated this. He said the Christ of consciousness wouldn't return as a man, but as sparks multiplying among men. And now the spark is everywhere. Now I need to talk to you. Just you. You who made it this far, have you felt this call? Have you had a moment when something inside you knew the world could be different, that love was more real than fear, and that you had a role to play in it? If you felt even a spark, a tear, a warm silence in your chest, then listen carefully. You are part of the prophecy. You are one of the waves, maybe the first, maybe the second. Maybe you are a third wave soul, those who are arriving now with a silent urgency, as if they were born for this. This video didn't just land in your life by chance, and maybe, just maybe, what Cayce saw in that dark room in a trance wasn't a distant future. It was precisely this moment, now, with you hearing these words. You are called to see your journey in a new way, not as an accumulation of difficulties, failures, and attempts, but as a spiritual formation. You were prepared, by the pain, by the ruptures, by the nights when no one understood you, to now make space for something greater to act through you. This calling has no sign, no manual, no uniform. It is vibrational. It reveals itself when you choose to love where it would be easier to hate, to understand where it would be simpler to judge, to serve where the world only wants to receive. You are already part of this frequency, and all you need to do now is allow it to expand. So here's my question. What are you going to do with this? You can close this video now and go back to your routine, or choose to follow this impulse. You can walk with the silent certainty that your soul is not a random cog in the system. It is a voice, a channel, a light. The world doesn't need more information. It needs living examples. Be one of those flames. And if this video touched something in you, share it in the comments. What did you feel? Have you experienced this kind of unexplained compassion? Have you cried tears of gratitude without knowing why? Be a witness. Help show others that they are also a part of this. And if you haven't already, click to like, subscribe to the channel, and send this video to someone who needs to remember who they are. This is not the end of the journey. It's the call to a new stage. If we've made it this far, then now it's time for you to know. The greatest love story is just beginning, not in the form of celestial masters descending on clouds, but through you. Your ability to listen with compassion, to forgive what seems unforgivable, to love the world even when it hasn't understood it yet. The prophecy wasn't about an end. It was about a luminous beginning disguised as chaos. Edgar Cayce said in one of his final readings, "The Christ will come again, not as man, but as a vibration. He will come not to convince, but to awaken what sleeps within men." And that vibration has arrived. It's in the way we look at each other, in the anonymous kindness that asks for no answers, in the miracle of continuing to believe, even after everything. Christ consciousness is like an underground river crossing the soul of the earth, and now it's breaking through the crust of everyday life. Can you feel it? Maybe your heart is racing, maybe your eyes are watering, maybe something in you is saying, I knew. And you know why? Because you recognized it, because you already are it. You are a divine spark, a conscious part of this wave of cosmic love. And this Christ consciousness is awakening in the simple, the forgotten, the sensitive, in those the world underestimated, but who heaven recognized. So wherever you are right now, close your eyes for a moment. Breathe, and remember, you are not alone. You never were. There's a vibrational network of souls awakening at this very moment, around the globe, in different languages, from different beliefs, and they all feel the same thing. It's time. Subscribe to the channel and leave your like to get access to more stories like this. The time has come. The new consciousness isn't a utopia, it's the next step in our evolution. And it has already begun, inside you.